Chapter 21. Wolf Hunter. "Thomas, please wake up," Matt begged as he leaned over the unconscious young rebel. But Thomas didn't stir. As he studied the rebel's face, Matt was startled to see how young Thomas looked without his makeup. "They think you and the others are criminals," Matt continued, "and your sister and her husband called you a traitor. Why don't they understand?" Matt sank down to his knees and put his head next to Thomas. "Please stay alive," he whispered. "Please, please, please stay alive." Matt awoke the next morning and wondered if it had all been a dream. He rubbed his eyes, hoping to find himself in his own bed, back home in Nebraska. But he quickly discovered that rather than his warm, comfy bed, he was lying on cold floorboards, with a stiff, thin quilt over him. A few feet away, Thomas's brother-in-law was emptying the ash from the fireplace. Matt sat up and looked over at the bed. Thomas's eyes were open, but his face was contorted with pain. "I never thought I'd see the day that the gentry of Boston tend to their own fires," Thomas said sarcastically. "I dare not risk my servants knowing any more of your visit here," his brother-in-law replied. There was a short silence. "I was sorry to hear about Harry," Master Hewson added, his voice softening. "Will you see that he gets a proper burial, William?" Thomas whispered. "I will do what I can," his brother-in-law replied. "It has never been my wish to see your sister and her family so divided. We are only following our conscience and what we believe is best for the colonies." "Best for the crown, you mean," Thomas replied. "I was born and raised in this colony, Thomas. We Hewsons were among the earliest settlers in Massachusetts. All I've worked for is here." Master Hewson's voice rose with emotion. "I'll not see it all torn down for some half-baked scheme that Sam Adams and a group of lawless ruffians in Philadelphia have concocted." A tense silence followed. "I am sorry that I cannot offer you the safety of our home." "Will you turn your wife's only living brother over to the hangman, then?" Thomas shot back. Matt held his breath as he looked from one man to the next. But Master Hewson shook his head. "You are still family, Thomas. Your politics cannot change the love your sister feels for you. I am well acquainted with a carpenter who has turned his hands from cabinetry to coffins of late. Business is booming, and fear of the fever is now so great that the coffin-maker's wagon has been one of the few they'll pass on through with little inspection. I will arrange for you and the boy to leave here, hidden in 2 of his coffins." "Has this carpenter pledged for the colonies?" asked Thomas. "Nay, the man does not take sides, but he will take gold." "Can you get us safely across the city?" Thomas asked. "I will see if today is possible," Master Hewson told him. Matt grew hopeful. He even let himself hope that the girls might turn up at the mill. "Can you at least give me until tonight to regain my strength for the journey?" Thomas pleaded. "I beg of you, William." Master Hewson hesitated. "Just until tonight, so my sister does not have to bury a second brother in the same week," Thomas said convincingly. "As you wish," Master Hewson relented. "But you must not stay a moment longer. Tonight at midnight, you must both be gone." "I shall not forget this kindness," Thomas said, closing his eyes. "Rest now while you can," his brother-in-law told him. But no sooner had Master Hewson left the room than Thomas's eyes flew open. "Come closer, Matthew," he called. "I must count on you now." Matt moved closer to the bed. "There is no time to waste," Thomas whispered. "One of General Washington's spies is wearing an English officer's uniform and has important information that the general needs. There is also intelligence that the general hopes to put into the redcoats' hands to lead them astray. Harry was meant to make the exchange, and alas, I am too weak. So now you must do it instead." "Me?" Matt squeaked. "But I don't know anything about being a spy." "On the contrary, my young friend," Thomas said. "You've already been quite successful at it." "What do you mean?" "You've already carried one message into the city in that big coat you wore," Thomas told him. "Fetch it for me, please." Matt took the coat from the chair and handed it to Thomas. Thomas turned over one of the large wooden buttons. As he gave it a push, it slid open to reveal a false bottom with a tiny rolled piece of paper inside it. "What does it say?" Matt asked. "It is written in Dr. Franklin's invisible stain," Thomas said. "It's best you not know the contents. But know this. If that message gets into the wrong hands, General Washington and his army would be in grave danger, and you might not live to see your next birthday," he said ominously. Matt gulped. "Where do I have to go?" he asked. "A house not far from here. You can walk. There is to be a ball there tonight," Thomas told him. A man dressed in a British officer's uniform will be waiting to make the exchange. Is that why you asked for more time? Thomas nodded. I'm sorry I had to lie, but I could not very well tell him the truth. My brother-in-law is a good-hearted man and easily persuaded. I'm afraid this war calls for men made of stronger stuff than he. But he is risking his life for you, Matt protested, and he is your family. Matt was confused. Master Hewson was the loyalist and the enemy, but he had a good heart. Shouldn't the enemy be bad? If some were good and some were bad, how could anyone know who to fight in a war? You'll find the house easily enough, Thomas said, cutting into Matt's thoughts. 'Twill be the only house on the street lit up like daylight, and the place will be crawling with British officers. He paused to take a breath. They'll need extra waiters to serve the punch. The house butler is warm to our cause, and warmer still to the coin we will pay him. The password you're to give him is Wolf Hunter. But we're locked in, Matt reminded him. Thomas smiled weakly. My brother-in-law forgets that I grew up in this house and am intimate with every inch of the place. Go to the chimney and look for a chipped brick on the right side above the floor. Lift it out. There should be an extra key behind it. Once out in the hall, take the little stairway to the left. It leads down to the pantry, and from there you could slip out the back door without being seen. He laid his head back on the pillow and closed his eyes. What do you think will happen to your sister's family when the Patriots win the war? I mean if they win the war, Matt said. Thomas scowled. Should we win this conflict, those who favor the crown would do better to leave the colonies for good. They will not be welcome here. Then your sister and her family would have to leave, Matt pointed out. They are your family. Won't you miss them? Besides, they were born here, and it's not fair to make them leave. War is not always fair, but if we do not take action, we risk losing everything, Thomas told him. Do you not see that our very lives are governed by the king's whims? He is a tyrant. There is no fairness here. He taxes every penny we make. His soldiers loot our houses and tear down our fencing for firewood. He has closed our harbor and patrolled the roads leading in and out of the city. We've run out of meat and milk. Our people are starving. It is our very lives we fight for, and for the right to live decently. His eyes grew cold, and his voice fell to a whisper. And what his men did to my brother, Harry, is a wrong I shall never forgive. Matt thought of Katie and how hard it was to be apart, not knowing if she was safe. How would he feel if his home was being looted and his family threatened? He had to help the Patriots. He had to help Thomas complete the mission. He walked over to the hearth and searched for the broken brick. He gave it a tug and quickly found the black iron key. Good, Thomas whispered weakly, but the hour grows late. You must make haste. Using his teeth and all of his strength, he tore the button from his coat and handed it over to Matt. Put it in your pocket and keep it safe, he said. Once you leave this house, go around to the front and turn right. Then make your way down the street straight away and keep walking until you come to the house ablaze with light and with many carriages waiting out front. You're to go to the side door where a butler will let you in. Tell him Moses sent you. Give him this. He took a gold coin from his vest pocket. What should I do once I get inside? Matt asked, slipping the coin safely into his pocket next to the button. The butler will instruct you, Thomas told him. He'll have a footman's uniform for you to wear. Just remember to keep the button on you at all times, and don't draw attention to yourself. You'll be given a tray from which to serve punch to the guests. You must look for a tall officer with a scar under his eye and the fourth button missing from the sleeve of his coat. Wait until he is alone. Then approach him. Make mention of his missing button. Listen closely for his reply. If he scolds you for speaking so brazenly, you either have the wrong man or the timing is too dangerous to make the transfer. Move away quickly. Matt nodded, but his head was swimming with questions. What if he made a mistake? What if he dropped the tray? But there was no time for doubts. He had to pay attention. His life would depend upon it. You will know it is the right man if he answers with a nod and says these words. I did misplace my button, and would be glad for another, Thomas continued. Then you must take the button from your pocket. Do not hand it to him, but rather place it on your tray next to his glass. He will take it and replace it with another. Put that button into your pocket and draw no attention to yourself. What should I do once I have the button? Matt asked. Guard it with your life. For if it was to get into the wrong hands, it would be your death warrant, Thomas told him, and would put all we struggle for in great jeopardy. Continue working until it is safe to leave by the door you came in. Whatever you do, you must get back here by midnight. Once outside, watch for the coffin maker's wagon. God willing, we'll both be back at the mill by morning and... But what about my sister? Matt interrupted. I need to find... We mustn't be thinking of our own needs now, Thomas cut him off, his eyes flashing open. General Washington and our countrymen are depending on us. What is at stake here is bigger than both of us. We have a chance to make a new country, to change the world, Matthew. Thomas reached out and squeezed his wrist. You are a good lad, and I'm sorry to have to draw one so young into such a dangerous endeavor. But you have my word. Once we've got the information to General Washington, I'll do what I can to help you find your sister. We'll find her together. What do you say? Together, Matt smiled. And when we do find her, Thomas continued with a wistful look in his eyes, you must promise me something. What? Matt asked. Don't ever lose her again, Thomas whispered hoarsely. Too many families have been broken apart by this struggle already. Matt knew he was talking about his own family and how divided they'd become. I won't lose her again, Matt promised. You are a brave boy, Matthew, Thomas said, and I am glad we got to meet. Me too, Matt agreed. Promise me something else, he whispered, his green eyes pleading. Anything, Matt said. Promise me you'll stay alive, Thomas whispered weakly. Matt nodded. I'll try. Good. Now repeat the password, Thomas ordered. Wolf Hunter, Matt said softly. Wolf Hunter. Chapter 22. So much fuss over a few leeches. As Thomas and Matt whispered their plans in the Houstons' attic, the Houston girls led the twins and Katie down the hall to Patience's bedroom on the floor below. Now bite down hard, said Mistress Coop, the hefty old woman who stood beside the bed. Wisps of gray hair hung from her cap, and the hems of her skirts were stained and dirty. A bloodied rag hung over her arm, and in her wrinkled hand she held a large glass jar full of squirming flat black leeches. She had placed a rope in Patience's mouth to bite down on to keep her from screaming. Lily, Emma, and Katie looked on in horror from the doorway. Even more terrifying was the sight of little Patience lying on the bed, with her bare arms outstretched and 5 shiny black worm-like leeches sucking blood from the open vein in her arm. You can't do that to Katie, cried Lily. Katie ran and hid behind the girls. It would be best if you all waited in the hall, said Master Houston, hurrying them out of the room. The twins pleaded with him to change his mind. He could not have Katie bled. It was only when the old woman came looking for Katie with the jar of hungry leeches in her hands that the twins turned around to find she had disappeared. Come now, child, barked Mistress Coop. I haven't time for your nonsense. But Katie was nowhere to be found. Everyone joined in the search. Emma looked in the bedrooms on the 2nd floor, while Lily went up to the attic on the 3rd. There in the dark hallway she found a closed door. Lily jiggled the knob, but it was locked tight. At the moment Lily was trying the doorknob, Matt was on the other side of the very same door. Quietly he put the key into the lock. But he pulled back quickly as he heard the doorknob jiggle from the other side. Lily had given Matt such a fright he almost fell over backward. Not wanting to waste time with the locked door, Lily raced back downstairs, where she joined the Houston sisters as they searched the sewing room and the drawing room. Meanwhile, Matt pressed his ear to the door and waited until he was sure the coast was clear. Then he put the key into the lock and slowly, soundlessly turned the knob. His heart beat wildly as he stole out into the hall and over the back stairwell. But he stopped halfway down at the sudden pounding of footsteps and voices. We must look everywhere, he heard Master Houston ordered. Matt panicked. Could Master Houston have already discovered he'd gone? Would they turn him over to the Redcoats if they called him? Matt sped down the stairs and tore out the back door before anyone could see him leave. He went so quickly he forgot to close the door. Mama, called Charity, running up the stairs. The back door is opened. Dear God, I hope she's not on the streets alone, Master Houston exclaimed. What about the room up on the 3rd floor, asked Lily. The door was locked, but I think I heard something in there. Maybe Katie's locked herself in. Mistress and Master Houston exchanged panicked looks. That's impossible, Master Houston declared. I am the only one with the key to that room. There is no way anyone could get in or out of there. We'd better try downstairs, Mistress Houston suggested. Suddenly there came the sound of shattering glass below, followed by a scream. Master Houston rushed down the stairs as Cook ran into the hall, wringing her hands. "'Tis a mob, master," she cried. "'Tis a rebel mob." Master Houston bolted the front door and secured the lock. "What is going on?" Mistress Coop demanded. "Yes, William, please tell us what has happened," Mistress Houston pleaded as the two looked down from the upstairs landing. Faith and Mercy stood on one side of their mother, Hope and Charity on the other. Lily and Emma leaned over the railing. "Someone threw a rock through the kitchen window," Cook cried. "It nearly hit me in the head." Hope started down the stairs, but her father stopped her. "Stay where you are," he ordered. "Don't anyone move." Suddenly there came a loud pounding on the front door. "We hear that General Howe's sweetheart is giving a ball tonight, Master Houston," a man shouted. "We heard you were going, so we fetched you a fine new coat to wear," someone else shouted. Laughter echoed from all around the front of the house. "Not a coat made of your expensive English cloth, brought over on one of your ships, mind you, but one made right here in the colonies," taunted another. "How do you fancy you'll look dancing the minuet in a coat made of tar and feathers?" There was more laughter. Master Houston's face grew taut as the voices from the other side of the door became louder and more brazen. "I hear it's all the fashion this year," another heckled. More loud laughter and jeering was followed by more shattering of glass. Then more rocks crashed through the upstairs windows. Faith and Hope screamed. Little Charity hid behind her mother's skirts. Lily pulled Emma close. "A Tory is someone with his head in England, his body in America, and his neck in need of a noose," someone shouted gleefully. "Why should they mean us such harm, William?" Mistress Houston cried. "We are loyal citizens. Why do they hate us so?" "Calm yourself, my dear," Master Houston called up to her. "We must stay calm." But everyone could hear the fear in his voice. "Tell them we've done nothing but follow the law." Mistress Houston's voice was rising to a shrill pitch. "Tell them our daughter is ill. Tell them to leave us alone. Tell them! "They are no more than common rabble," Master Houston said, trying to calm her. "They only mean to frighten us. It will do no good to answer such evil threats. The soldiers will surely pass by soon and come to our aid." No one spoke as they hoped for the sound of a soldier's drum, but there was only the constant pounding on the door. It grew louder and louder, until Lily was certain the door itself would be torn from its hinges. But just as suddenly as the pounding had started, it stopped. An eerie silence followed. No one in the house dared to speak or move, until they heard a familiar little voice from the other side of the door. "Lily, Emma, they won't let me back in. Please help me, Emma. Lily, please." "That's Katie!" Lily and Emma cried out as they rushed to the door. "We've got our tar pot full and a bag of feathers to go with it," a voice shouted from the other side. "I say, if the master won't wear the jacket, this little wench will." "Help!" Katie yelled. "Help!" "We've got to get her now," said Lily. "It's too dangerous for any of you out there," Master Houston said. He put his hand on the doorknob. "William, no!" Mistress Houston screamed. "Don't go, Papa!" cried Hope and Mercy. But Master Houston paid them no mind, and before they could stop him, he unlocked the bolt, stepped outside, and slammed the door shut behind him.